Ms. Gambler, let me start with you. I find it interesting that the General Accounting Office found that 3/4 of all alien investors in TEAs invest in real estate projects, and yet real estate construction accounts for about 6% of the U.S. economy. So why do 75% of these investments go into what is only 6% of the economy?
Congressman, that's not something we looked at specifically as part of our review. It may be due to kind of the universe of projects that are available for investors to seek to invest in. So it could be, a product of just the types of projects that are available to investors, and that is more predominantly in certain industries than others.
Is it possible that under the current law and regulations where gerrymandering can allow you to figure development in highly attractive areas like the Hudson Yards example that we used earlier, that the money would gravitate toward what would be considered to be easier investments than it would be to invest the money in a rural area or in a high unemployment area?
I mean, I think it's reasonable that the types of projects that are available for investors to invest in are probably driven by a number of factors, including what's currently allowed under law and regulation in terms of how projects in regional centers can designate TEAs or can use TEAs that have been designated.
Thank you. Mr. Wall, I read your testimony. It's easy to imagine that projects such as the Big River Steel in Osceola, Arkansas, are the exact type of projects and that Congress wanted to facilitate in creating the Investor Visa program and the Regional Center program. Isn't it disappointing that so few such projects get funded through this program?
It is. I think, when we were asked to do this and you got into the program and without any previous experience, you look at the regs and you say, well, there's TEAs and there's non-TEAs. Clearly a project like that would fall into a TEAs, and intuitively you would say, well, this clearly looks like a good job creator. And so when you get more immersed into it and you discover that you're competing with very, very impressive projects in very affluent areas of the country, it is disappointing and it is frustrating. It has been.
And it's highlighted by the fact that while this would be considered a less attractive area for the most part for investments, Big River Steel is going to pay its mostly non-college educated workers in rural Arkansas $75,000 a year or more. How do you think this compares with the wages that non-college educated workers will make at the high-end hotels and condos that are being built with EB-5 funds?
I would hesitate to speculate to an exact number, but I would assume that it would be much higher, Congressman.
Ms. Bruner, you state in your testimony that the administration should cancel the proposed regulations and allow Congress to complete the legislative reform of the EB-5 program that your committee has been working on with stakeholders for the past 2 years. Now you mention your involvement with a number of industry groups who, in my experience, have been incredibly resistant to any real reforms and who have, in fact, stymied reform over the past 2 years. These groups like the Investor Visa program the way it is. They want the investment level to remain low, and they want to be able to qualify luxury condo projects as being in depressed areas. If the regulations are canceled, why would they have any more incentive to engage in substantive negotiations than they have over the last 2 years?
Mr. Chair, one thing that's happened in the past years, I've become the membership chair and spokesperson for the EB-5 Investment Coalition. Since that time, the statements in my testimony actually reflect the alignment of those groups and that we are prepared to eliminate the TEA, go to a single investment model, and my understanding is that we're very excited to cooperate with your committee and the Senate committee and achieve reform this calendar year.
Oh, good. I'm definitely glad to hear that. One of your statements caught my ear, and it did Mr. North as well, and that is that current markets will not support the investment amounts that are provided for in these regulations. And yet, for a program that for most of its existence never hit the 10,000 green card cap until just 3 years ago, when it has suddenly mushroomed into not just hitting the cap, but now having a 7 or 8 year waiting list, meaning that there's a backlog of 70 to 80,000 green cards that are committed for and in demand right now. This disturbs me for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think, like Mr. Sensenbrenner, it makes it very clear that this program can justify much higher payments for green cards than investments for green cards, if you will, than is currently provided for. But secondly, it bothers me that this program has been sold like that to people, primarily in China, who I don't think have a clue that this program isn't even authorized beyond April of this year. There is no authorization whatsoever for any green card beyond the expiration of the current continuing resolution in April, and yet this industry, if you will, is busy selling green cards in China to people who, I don't think even have any idea that if the program were allowed to expire in April, would have nothing except for a 70 to 80,000 green card backlog. What would happen if that were to occur, and what can you tell me about how the people who promote this program in places like China make full disclosure to these people who are making these investments?
I can tell you how my company makes full disclosure. We make sure that all of our investors are aware of the pending expiration or the pending reform of the program is what we're hopeful for.
But you still think it's appropriate to have them go ahead and make investments without the knowledge that the program's even going to continue?
No, they do not make investments without that knowledge. That is not a true statement for our investors. They're all aware of the April 28th deadline for Congress and for the industry. And the market has slowed significantly. It's slowed because of the expiration, and it's slowed because of the significant backlog. I'd like to address one of your earlier comments in your statement about the increased demand that we've seen recently. So we're all well aware here that demand really started in 2008. I would argue that that is when the price matched the demand, which allowed the supply of the visas to be utilized. So it wasn't until 2008 that 500,000 was actually the right price for the market demand. Now it seems that 500,000 is a bit low for the market demand, and that it would be better served with an increase in the price. We support that. I support that as a company and as a stakeholder in the industry. What I support, though, is a single investment amount that would drive more investment to distressed areas in a set-aside program, instead of forcing them into a reduced investment amount below what the higher qualified areas could receive.
I agree with I'm way over my time here. I just want to make one more point. I agree with your assessment that a lot of this got started following the financial crisis in 2008 because there was a severe shortage of capital at that time, and this became attractive. But it didn't shoot through the roof until you get to about 2013 or 2014. That's the first time we ever hit the cap. And now in the 3 years since then, when capital has been far more abundant, and it has been noted, far more capital flows into the United States for other reasons than this reason, that we have this huge backlog. And now as we're trying to reform this program, we see tremendous resistance from people who don't want to see greater investments, or who don't want to see the reforms take place until this entire investment backlog, now 7 to 8 years, is worked down. I find that intolerable given the problems the program has. I'm now happy to yield to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, and I'll be generous with